I know this is kind of different from all the stuff I've been making so far, but I just, like the sketchbook tour, really wanted to make something like this for like a few years, because I really like listening to these while I draw, and, you know, I wanted to yap about my OCs, you know, like any good artist. Before I start, due to the nature of what this story was about, I need to give content warnings for, like, there's a lot of mentions of death, and it gets a little gory, so if you don't want to hear about that, then you can just miss this one out. This might seem irrelevant, but stay with me on this one. Back when I was 14 or 15, our school was adjusting after the back end of COVID, changing our usual 5 one-hour lessons to 1 1-hour and 2 2-hour lessons. That was really hard to say. COVID had left me, like many others, quite deflated with life. I was sat in one of these 2-hour biology lessons when a wave of existentialism hit me. For like an hour and a half of this class, I was internally freaking out about how I'm the only person that I know for sure is real because I can't see into anyone else's head. You know when you have those weird crisis moments. After a while, I just sort of stopped and went, wow, this would make a banging story. So I paused my existential crisis and doodled the main character on a little sheet of paper. I later named the story A Guide to Surviving the Afterlife. Bonus points if you can guess what manhwa I was reading for the first time when I did that. It went through quite a lot of changes, but the general premise stayed the same. Imagine that you just died, and instead of waking up in whichever afterlife you believe in, you wake up in a tank. Yes, I know this sounds like The Matrix, but I only watched that movie like a year after I'd already written this down, so I'm keeping it in. Faceless doctors move around you, seemingly ignoring your existence until they lift you out, plop you in a wheelchair, and roll you down the hospital hallway. They leave you in a room full of other people that look just as confused as you, and upon talking to some of them, they all recite the same story. All had died. The lights dim, and a video appears before you. A man in a suit informs you that the afterlife is... Okay, it gets a little hazy from here. It's either a test or an experiment. One of those, but spoiler alert, that's not all it is. He tells you that you join a group of 4 in total and complete trials, and then the story unfolds. The other massive thing about all the other people there is that they're all from their own separate realities. Essentially, the only person that you know is real is you. Your entire world has been designed for you specifically. Everyone else has their own autonomy, but you are the only real person. So when you die, everything disappears. This doesn't apply when you enter the afterlife though, since all those people were the only real people in their respective realities as well. It was quite a loose plotline because I was never really sure what would happen past the first trial, but I had a general idea. I kept getting loads of different ideas of ways it could end, and eventually I got so frustrated with it that I just stopped. I won't be rewriting the entire plotline, but I will revise the backgrounds of the main characters. This is mostly a redraw to see how I've improved, redesign, etc. The format I wrote this in was intended to be a book, but I had very, very little experience on it at the time, so there are some really funny lines. Okay, so here's what's gonna happen. In the speed paints, I'm gonna show a full body drawing, a side profile, and a front view drawing of each character's version of Are You Kidding Me? I don't know why. I started doing it with the first one, and I was like, wouldn't it be really funny if I just did it with all of them? So, yeah, that's what's happening. We aren't gonna talk about how I can't draw shoes. Okay? Okay, cool. The first character I made for this story was Hugo Baron. In the original story, he goes through the plot hating everyone and everything, even when all the people around him try to befriend him, but in the new version, I'm gonna have it so his character arc is being open with others. After a while, I can't lie, writing him just made me really frustrated, but the newer version is quite similar to the old version. Hugo is a 24-year-old living in Manhattan, and he starts the story on the verge of losing his tiny studio apartment, having not been able to get a steady job for years. Feeling like he's at rock bottom, he staggers into a bar tucked away behind buildings, planning on getting blackout drunk. Several drinks later, a man comes up to him and asks him about himself. Hugo begins telling the man a very theatrical version of what I just described, actually taking the man by surprise. In this part of the script, I was gonna make a joke about how, because my brain was going so fast, I would miss out words in the original story, but I wrote, this section, breathtaking phrases such as... Let me read it in the way it's supposed to be written. This section includes breathtaking phrases such as, his would smile shrink a little at my dry response. The man leaves behind a business card. Wait, shit. This is the plot of Squid Game. Did I make Squid Game before Squid Game existed? Am I a secret genius? Anyway, so Hugo gets sober the next day and contacts this number he was given. The company he applied to, I'm using very heavy air quotes, but you can't see it, had him complete odd jobs for money, like taking things to an empty warehouse or meeting up with strangers in dark alleys, you know, sound business practice stuff. He drew the line when these people wanted him to be the getaway driver while they broke into a rich family's house and robbed them blind. Turns out, they were a gang! Aw, who could have seen that coming? Unfortunately, he wasn't allowed to say no because the next day, Hugo had several gang members on his doorstep. Despite his pleas, they drag him up to the top of his apartment complex. The gang leader has hung him over the edge of the building by his shirt collar and... Oh, you know what, I'm just gonna read exactly what I put. I begged and pleaded with them to let me go until the man clutching me finally said, okay, and dropped me 20 stories to my imminent death. And that's exactly how it should be read, by the way. While in the original version he hates everyone and everything, he would go through a maybe I'm the problem arc, which I think would definitely make me not hate writing him. I find it really funny that when I was a kid and a young teenager, I would make characters that would be very unstable in life and just depressed with adult life, and now I live in an apartment and actively enjoy eating bran flakes. Man. Anyway, about the art, I was gonna draw what they would have worn in life as the full body pose, but I know that Hugo's would have just been a shirt and shorts, so I used him to redesign the uniform that they get given in the afterlife, especially because that's what I draw them in the most. The really annoying plot hole that I could never find an explanation to is that I always draw a very visual part of how one of the characters died on their design, and it's such a massive part of his design that I can't change it. But with Hugo, he died from shock right before he died. So, wait, he died from shock right before he died, before he hit the ground. So it's really hard to display that. I did keep his piercings though, because I did that back when I watched Reimagining for the first time, and I think they look cool. Are they practical in his situation? Probably not. Do I like drawing them? I do. So I'm keeping them. The really funny thing about the design about the old uniform is that I gradually got those clothes myself because I wanted a sleeveless turtleneck so bad, right? I absolutely wear that thing every single day of my life, and to the point I looked like I was cosplaying the uniform, and I think that's funny. Here is the visual evidence, the photo evidence of me constantly wearing that outfit. You know what? I was happy to find that turtleneck. I'm wearing it right now, okay? I realise I've never done any digital art of him before, or any of the other characters, so that's weird. Speaking of the other characters, I'm gonna move on to the next one. I'm just gonna go in order that I designed them. So the next character is Clover Xander. Her backstory was quite hazy, but the solidified version is that she's a 25-year-old woman and her reality was in the midst of a zombie apocalypse. Clover, who was formerly a doctor, works as a researcher for a cure, like in Maze Runner. She was very good at her job and was on the verge of a breakthrough when suddenly the zombies infected some of her associates and destroyed a lot of her research. She only made it out with one of her co-workers and a little tiny bit of what was left of her notes, and the two of them took shelter in a abandoned garden shed. They gradually ran out of food and water, and eventually the zombies found them. When they broke through the door, Clover put herself in the way of her friend, instructing her to follow the notes that she salvaged and save humanity. Her friend managed to sneak past the zombies as they surrounded Clover, killing her. Though since the world disappeared after Clover died, the sacrifice she made that kept her going through the first hour or so of her death had been rendered meaningless. In the original story that I wrote, while Hugo's watching the video of the main villain describing their situation, Clover stands up and screams in anguish. And when all the characters meet for the first time, Clover seems really standoffish and cold, but after their first trial, her and Hugo form a sibling-like relationship. In the drawings, I was thinking of changing her hair because I don't think her original hairstyle made a lot of sense. But after sort of changing it but then deciding to go back to the ponytail, I found it was actually not hard to draw it in a way that made sense. She has bite marks on the back of her neck from the zombies, which she uses as a reminder that what happened to her really did happen. She's kind of similar to Hugo in the sense that she's also quite fed up with everyone and everything, but in a more human way. I mean, obviously they're both human, but because he's just an asshole about it and she's not, that's what differentiates them, but it also kind of makes them get along because they just laugh about how stupid the other two are together. One really weird after effect about writing this story is when I was sort of 15, I had so many dreams about being in like a Hunger Games battle royale situation, because that's basically what was going on in this story. And for some reason, because I used to write down my dreams, I still do sometimes. There are so many. Oh my god, I forgot to mention, the redesign of their uniform was it's sort of supposed to look like, you know when you go in laser tag, this might seem like a stretch, but in laser tag how they make you wear these like vests with like your colour on the front, and you have to wear all black because, you know, it's laser tag. One of these dreams I had was, it was set in like a massive laser tag arena, but instead of laser tag, it was we kill each other. Let's just get this out of the way. No, he is not Gojo. Anyway, his name is Quentin Holt. He's 26, and I think he was like Canadian, or his version of Canadian. His last name used to be Nip, N-I-P-P, but on the design of the original uniform, they had their last name printed on their chest, so I thought it would look really strange, and it did. In his world, there was a major environmental disaster causing the whole Earth to be almost uninhabitable. Unlike in Clover's world, where her apocalypse forced humanity to band together to fight off their threat, Quentin's apocalypse tore humanity apart. There is nothing but sand. People live in enclosed domed cities to provide artificial cool winds and nourishment. The divide between financial classes is much wider as a result. Quentin, like Hugo, doesn't have much money and was involved through? It says though. And was involved, though voluntarily, in a criminal gang. Quentin's gang were like family. I say gang, but they were like basically just a found family trying to get by. In my original notes for him, I genuinely haven't read this in about 3 years, but it says that Quentin was abandoned in an alleyway when he was 6, joined a gang, but didn't realise they were a gang and not a rock band for 4 years. I think that's really funny. I do not remember writing that down at all. As years went on, their gang became the centre point for a revolution against politicians, and Quentin was very active in it. One day, an anonymous tip was given to the authorities, and the whole thing was quickly shut down, and some of the main people that were involved got taken into the city, into the centre of it. Quentin was separated from the others, and they questioned him about the revolution, saying they might even let him go with community service if he cooperates. He knew they were lying, though, and spat at them. If he was going to die either way, he would die with his values. Quentin was taken into a smaller, darker room, and his eyes were gouged out. He was there, left in that room, to bleed to death alone. I think his dynamic with the other characters is my favourite. I might have liked the dynamic he had with one of the characters a little too much because I started drawing ship art of them. I'm not going to say which one because it isn't actually canon, but you can guess in the comments, I guess, or something. About the art, muscles are not my strong point. Did you get it? Strong as muscles. But this is definitely better drawings of them I've done, along with wanting his outfit to fit a typical apocalypse setting. I was sort of referencing the first coloured drawing I did of Quentin in an old sketchbook that I was very proud of at the time. I remember I used to really like drawing him, and I draw him in class all the time. So it's fun to draw him again and like revisit that old design. Oh my god, about to get to the last one already? It's like this video took me ages or something. The last character that I'm going to be talking about in this video is Soren Blaine. He's 25 years old and his world's equivalent to British, which I think is really funny because I did the typical American movie cliche of making the posh rich guy British. Soren's world is very typically fantasy with castles and knights and all that. He is of high nobility and his family is very well known amongst the people. However, the ones in power are not humans, but vampires. They control humanity from the shadows living amongst them. Soren's family are part of negotiating between humans and vampires, but he doesn't find that out until he's an adult and that the, in air quotations, negotiations involve providing the vampire council with human sacrifices to keep their hunger at bay. He had an older brother that was being taken away from him to learn all about the politics, while Soren was left to sit alone behind the giant walls of his palace. I've just had a really weird thought that if his world would be drawn in any art style other than mine, it would be a typical fantasy manhwa style. Anyway, he wasn't allowed to play with his brother when they were children because he was seen as a distraction to his progress. In this new version of the story, I wasn't originally going to change the reason that Soren's brother hated him, but then I thought about getting a little controversial here. Hear me out. His brother was firmly against the human sacrifice thing and claimed that he would abandon the family as soon as he was able. Their parents turned to Soren, being the next born son, to lead in his place. His brother expected him to retaliate as well, but when he was old enough to be told about the sacrifices, he was of the mindset that it was necessary for the greater good of their people. His brother left the palace that same night. Devastated that their parents had corrupted Soren after seeing that the number of human sacrifices had not changed, his brother returned to the palace some years later. Their parents had since passed away, so Soren was the only one left to carry out their legacy. His brother approached him in his chambers unannounced and stabbed him with their father's sword that Soren had left by his bedside, ending the cycle of murder. I was hesitant to add that at first because of his self-righteousness that he'd exuded in the original story, but then I realised that that's exactly why it would work. Since he's such a dutiful guy, he would make the sacrifice of a few to save thousands. His parents probably said that he was heroic for it, but that doesn't mean it didn't weigh on his mind, and that would be something that would sort of haunt him all the time. Weirdly enough, this is my favourite backstory that I've revised, but I'm not overly happy with how the drawings turned out. I'm still not very good at character design since I spent a really long time drawing faces and nothing else, but I'm still learning and I think I've improved a lot here, so there's that. I'd like to come back to it when I've improved even more and redesign his clothes again. I did try really hard to not use blue and gold again, but it's my favourite colour combination. What can I do? It was really fun revisiting these characters, but there's still a few more that need even more reworking than these ones, so I'll probably do another one of these one day. I hope this kind of video once in a while is okay in between when I do my animations. I thought it was fun. And thank you for watching. Please come back soon. That didn't mean to sound as desperate. Bye!